Production down, bureaucracy up, and green zone working more or less unchanged. A difficult birth for the Rimini initiative. Also in this programme, possessions go professional as Network Rail gets to grips with safety and efficiency. How the Yeovil P-Way is denied a green oasis by a signalling conspiracy. And the Communications Forum, where straight talking makes all the difference. You're watching Safetynet 20. The Rimini initiative has been coming under pressure as a result of what Network Rail described as teething problems following its introduction. Whilst COSs are, for the most part, being provided with pre-planned safe systems of work, attempts to schedule more work into green zones resulted in a maintenance backlog. Things have since settled down, but the amount of green zone working remains more or less unchanged.
It's a mixed picture. A large take-up of T1 in some places, more red zone working in others. What's clear is that there are still issues to address, not least earlier approval of line blockages and a lack of buy-in amongst some managers. Jarvis Rail supports the drive from red zone to green and believes Rimini has brought a much-needed planning discipline. Like other contractors, it's developed an action plan with Network Rail, identifying issues to be tackled and timescales in which to do so. But it believes better planning information must be provided, together with a willingness to address current access difficulties.
What we do feel is that there are a number of issues that still need to be resolved to make it an effective process. It was never going to change things overnight, and we made efforts to make our staff aware that that was the company's perception, and indeed that's proven to be the case.
With levels of green zone working more or less unchanged, contractors have been monitoring the position of the Railway Inspectorate. Fear of HMRI action is widely seen as one cause of the initial clamour for green zones. Whilst it does accept that red zone working is often unavoidable, it's keen to see a reduction in the use of lookouts.
There is a tendency for the move straight down the hierarchy right to the bottom, and quite clearly that wouldn't be acceptable to us. You need to look through the complete hierarchy, and particularly we would encourage the industry on greater use of the ATWS systems.
A multi-million-pound programme to put in ATWSs at fixed locations is well underway, but concerns have been raised that the systems are still mostly lying idle months after their installation. Network Rail insists that major changes in protection arrangements will come over time through the joint action plans, including an increase in green zone working, starting on lightly used lines where opportunities already exist.
Well, Colin Clifton is Network Rail's head of workforce safety. He joins us from Euston. A lot of people went into Rimini, Colin, believing that it would lead to an increase in the amount of green zone working, and yet we seem to have backtracked on that somewhat over recent weeks.
Rimini was always about both planning and promoting better means of protection. Green zones are obviously the best. I think we've always had to be pragmatic, that we can't always use green zones for every job, and that's shown through over the last few months.
But the industry has spent the best part of a decade relentlessly telling those at the track face that green zone working is the only way forward.
Yes, it has, but unfortunately it hasn't resulted in huge number of green zones being available, probably only 20%. So if we can move through Rimini to a position where perhaps 80% of work is done either in green or in a red with ATWS, that will in itself be a significant shift.
I don't think anyone would argue with that. Do you seriously believe that's achievable, given where we're at the moment?
I do. I think we're investing in fixed ATWS where we know we're going to have continuing need for red zone, and we're working very hard with the TOCs and the SRA to deliver scheduled maintenance possessions that enable as much work to be done green as possible. OK, Colin Clifton, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Graham.
A contractor sustained fatal injuries when he became trapped between a crane jib and the tailgate of a wagon in which he was working. The incident happened at a worksite at Chelford near Wilmslow on February the 23rd. Initial reports suggest the man was in the second vehicle of an engineering train helping to unload materials. It's understood that a movement of the train was authorised, but the jib of a road rail machine being used to help with the unloading had not been moved clear. The man became trapped as the train moved. An inquiry has been conducted into the accident, but the findings are not yet known. And there was another fatality on March the 28th, when a contractor was electrocuted after coming into contact with live overhead line equipment. It's understood he was on top of a wiring train at a CTRL site at Western Hangar in Kent. Network Rail is making major changes to the way possessions are managed as part of a drive to improve planning, safety and efficiency. They'll involve dedicated teams within each contract area, looking after multi-user possessions, with specialist contractors brought in to provide PICOPs and hand signallers.
I know it impinges sometimes on the other lines.
Possession Delivery Manager Tony Menzies has his guiding hand on the tiller as local contractors meet in York to confirm requirements at their monthly planning meeting. His area-wide overview ensures the right work is prioritised and possessions are planned to maximise safety and efficiency. Over the coming weeks, this process will become the norm nationwide as Network Rail retakes ownership of possession management. It hopes to wave goodbye to late changes and the risks they inevitably bring.
This is going to stop infrastructure companies working away from the agreed plan. The new process will coordinate and allow you to work at the appropriate time and not to be sorted out on the night by others.
The West Coast project has been reaping these benefits for 2 years, having set up its own possession management regime. Each T3 comes with a carefully developed plan to address the needs of all its users and is delivered by a separate specialist company. The principle is to detach the PICOP from the inevitable commercial pressure of being employed by the principal contractor, allowing them to focus on the requirements of the possession as a whole.
Now it's a lot different. We have 8 weeks of planning. We look at our blocking points well in advance. We look at the work content, and it's a lot easier to go and do the job because you've been involved in it for a long time.
Possession management as a function of carrying out engineering work carries a lot of risk and also can potentially carry a lot of benefits from the point of view of productivity, performance, and there are great gains to be made if it is run in a professional way.
The new regime of possession management teams and specialist contractors is being rolled out across the country during the summer to coincide with Network Rail's review of areas and regions.
0012 hours.
An investigation has found that human error was the cause of a train passing a work site undetected by the ATWS set up to protect it. The incident happened at Beatock on the West Coast Main Line last November. The Track 02 system had alerted the operator to the fact that the battery was low in one of its train-detecting sensors, but this was cancelled and no action taken. An hour later, the sensor shut down, after which the train passed. The report says that the system worked correctly, but the incident has highlighted some training and mentoring issues, together with the need for better guidance on operating and maintaining ATWSs. With traffic levels continuing to increase and red zone working frowned upon, efforts to fulfil inspection requirements without the need for line blockages are forever coming into sharper focus. Over recent months, Carillion Rail, in partnership with Eurail Scout, has been trialling a virtual inspection system, allowing its patrolmen to view the track without leaving the depot.
However much they improve safety, disruptive blockages for track patrolling are costing the industry a small fortune. With 5 cameras at either end, trains like this could become the eyes of the patrolman for many weekly inspections. It does, of course, require regular train paths, which are also hard to come by.
The train as an engineer's train isn't sort of rated the same as passengers, and so other trains get priority, and sometimes, like today, you end up where you can't complete all the runs.
Back at base, the patrolman can inspect the track without setting foot on it, bypassing the vexed issue of red and green zones. The unions have been assured that use of the technology wouldn't result in job cuts. For the virtual patrolman, the benefits are clear.
And here I'm safe, I can look at my images. The people who took the recordings on the train, they were safe, and there's no need for the stoppage of trains taking T2s.
It will certainly make it safer, and I think this is definitely a way forward for programming work and for the line managers as well.
With new services and line upgrades set to apply more pressure on maintenance, work on a foot patrol alternative is receiving ever more attention.
We're working closely with Network Rail, and the idea is to gradually expand the scope of the project as our belief in the technology strengthens and as we get the buy-in of the rest of the industry.
The team's attention is now moving to a new train currently going through the acceptance process. Network Rail is also trialling its own equipment, and if all this technology proves effective, virtual systems could be the future for plain line inspections.
Now, you'd think that on a single track line through rural Wiltshire, there'd be so many green zones available you'd trip over them in the cess. But life, as we know, is never that simple. As Balfour Beatty's Jeff Matthews explains, a combination of train service and signalling conspire to force the Yeovil P-Way into the protection method of last resort. It doesn't look like the planner's worst nightmare. No trains as far as the eye can see. So today's assignment from the job bank should be a likely candidate for a green zone. But no.
Appearances can be deceptive. You've as much chance of a T2 here as you have on some of the busier sections of the East Coast Main Line. It's not the number of trains, there's basically one each way every hour, but combine that with a 10-mile long signalling section between here and Salisbury and between here and Gillingham, and you begin to see the problem. As one train leaves, another is waiting to enter. And it's like that all day long.
Yeah, it's just the nature of how it is, unfortunately. To inspect with the T1, once the train's gone past, we'd have a chance. But to actually come here and do any work like this, where we need to be working in the daylight, it's impossible to set up a green zone.
45 minutes between trains, but even here there's no green oasis, thwarted by the peculiarities of the service and signalling.
This train that's just arrived, it will take it another 12 minutes to get to Gillingham from here. It will stop, terminate, come back. It will arrive here at 12:05 in half an hour. It will then cross with the down train, which will then get to Gillingham approximately 55 minutes from now. So the first time we could take a green zone would be 55 minutes away.
But even then, the section is never clear long enough to complete the paperwork. So red zone it is. Not something this work group will get very excited about. With so little traffic, their biggest difficulty is keeping the lookout on his toes.
With the trains early morning, all heading up to London, you might not see a down train for an hour and a half. The challenge for the lookout man, especially the distant men, is to keep their concentration going for the time they're out there, not be distracted. Although they might not see a train very quickly, he needs to spot it, obviously, when it comes.
There are many reasons why the much promoted move from red to green has been so difficult to deliver in practice. Jeff and co are victims of the infrastructure, but it begs the question, if we can't make it work here, what hope is there for places where green zones would be of greatest value?
A lot of people would say we're quite fortunate with the single line and wide cesses, and we don't have the problems that there are in Clapham and other places further up the line, but it is a problem for us to work green zone as required by Rimini. We're basically stuck with red.
And finally, improving the quality of safety-critical communications is a long-held industry aspiration. Deficiencies still play a part in 90% of rail incidents. As part of May's Communications Week, we paid a visit to one of several dozen forums to be held across the country, allowing staff to practice their skills away from the railway.
So I tell Mum to stay in the car or get out of the car?
It can be embarrassing.
Dad?
Work pressure may get in the way, but effective communication can make all the difference when safety's at stake.
Lots of trees.
With use of the phonetic alphabet and standard phrases still patchy,
no arches.
A series of forums is exposing communications problems and helping to address them.
So what could they have done to improve the communication?
Leave the railway, I guess.
Frontline staff take part in discussions, exercises and quizzes, challenging them to look again at how they pass on and understand information. It's an entertaining formula which goes down well.
It's about one of the best ones I've been on. So most of them tend to be, this is how we're going to do it and this is how you're going to have to go and implement it, and then when it came to, you never did. But yeah, this is very interactive, so it's quite interesting.
Sorted it out in
The
what?
forums last one day, but some companies, under the day-to-day pressure of filling rosters, have been reluctant to release valuable members of staff.
There is no point at all in having a forum if we just get drivers or we just get signallers. You've got to have a combination of people. It's an industry-wide thing. Let's release people. It's only a day.
The forums are free and likely to continue at venues across the country well into next year.
And that's it. We're back in September from the Safetynet team. Goodbye.